Board of Directors. It is April 20th, 23. It's 7:32. Yes.
I want to remind everyone to be very conscious about talking into the microphone, please, so that everybody can hear what we're saying.
And that's why I got 2?
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll give you 2.
Double you up. Okay, Clemens, could we have a roll call, please?
Director Decker?
Here.
Director Slater-Carter?
Present.
Director Boyd?
Here.
Director Softby?
Here.
Director Young?
Present.
All right. All of us here. Let's see. For President's Statement, I'm going to highlight that tonight we are going to be talking about our transition from at-large to by-division elections. And I want to shout out to anyone in the audience who has any thoughts on public service. It is a good thing. Many of us here have done it for quite some time. Some are just starting in on it, but it's civic duty is a terrific thing. It makes our community stronger. And if you have any interest in it, paying attention tonight and to some of our upcoming meetings, you can learn quite a bit about what's happening, why, how it's going to work, and opportunities where you might be able to step up and offer your services to the community. So that is my President's Statement tonight. Do we have any oral comments for anything that is not on the agenda?
Yes.
I see Catherine, and I see Virginia. So let's go first to Catherine and then to Virginia.
Thank you. As some of you may know, I also am honored to sit on the San Mateo County Harbor District Board, which does have district elections. At our board meeting yesterday, we had a wonderful presentation by a fellow who's been consulting with the district for 7 years, Brad Demetz, on the dredging of the harbor. Once again, the permittors have decided to delay our permit for another year. That will make this project an 8-year-long project. Meanwhile, Highway 1 is falling apart. Pictures of it made it into a national publication called Shore and Ocean. And we have serious problems on the coast side with that area and the fragility of it. I have asked the Harbor District to declare an emergency and start working to get the sand out of the harbor and back on Surfers Beach where it belongs. I'm looking for support from the community, both to the Harbor District and when we get this going, because we've got to stop this highway from eroding in. Somebody mentioned yesterday that, they'll just move the road eastward and put it in the middle of the Burnham Strip. I don't think that's going to happen. I will say the good news is, for those of us in Montara, we are on the good side of the break, so we can get to Mezzaluna and important places that are for our local culture. But this could be a disaster for schools and buses and for Grenada, because people are going to be having to drive through a road that is not designed to be a highway. So please get a hold of me or any of the other members of the Harbor District Board, or just call the Harbor District. The general manager is Jim Pruitt. We need community support on this because we need to get this thing moving. Thank you.
All right. Let's go to Virginia James Raleigh.
Thank you, President Boyd, and thank you, directors, for allowing me to speak today. Couple of things. I echo everything that Catherine said, and it's really going to take a community effort. So, Catherine, thank you for bringing that up. I'm also a member of the Harbor Board. And I want to congratulate Sid for being appointed to this, to the MWSD. So congratulations, Sid. but I'm actually here to let everyone know that I would be humbled and honored to have your support for the seat for on the LAFCO board for the special district seat specifically, that Rick Lohman, that's now vacated because of Rick Lohman's very sad and untimely passing. I am such a supporter of special districts. I live in the unincorporated area of West Menlo Park, and I sit on 2 special district boards, the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board, and as I said earlier, the Harbor Board. And I know how important special districts are because we provide essential services. And those essential services mean a lot to a lot of communities that are not necessarily in cities, and especially on the coast where big swaths of land are, well, I would say most of the coast is very rural and unincorporated. So I am hoping to fill some big shoes and replace Rick, who can't really fully ever be replaced, but I hope to be able to represent special districts well, and I hope to have your support. So thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. Let's go to Sid.
Hi, I just wanted to say I attended the Fire Safe Council meeting, and as I drive around, I see lots of wood down, and people in their own yards probably have a lot of branches and stuff that need to be chipped. So they've announced their chipper dates for the coast side, May 8th for Montara and Moss Beach, and their specific streets. So you have to, I posted it on Nextdoor if anybody needs to know what street. And it's May 1st for El Granada, even though that's not our district. I just thought I'd throw it out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Do we have any other public comment or items not on the agenda? Yes, Sid.
I did attend the PCTV open house this weekend, and Ray Muller showed up about the same time I did, so they asked us to be interviewed. So put a little shout out for MWSD. That's all.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations to PCTV for their anniversary.
Yes. PCT has served us really well for quite a few years now. Remember when we were first considering it and wondering if that would be a good idea. And it's worked out really well. So
Scott, didn't you used to tape them on your iPhone in the early on,
Oh.
way before that?
I videoed these meetings a lot of different ways over many years, but I'm really glad to have someone else doing that. It's all right. Let's see. We have a public hearing. Item 1: review and possible action concerning transition from at-large to by division based election.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So, I mean, this is the big topic for tonight. District is required to transition from at-large to a by-division election system. Tonight, we have the first of a series of meetings or public hearings. Tonight, we're getting information about the districting process, its laws, description of the data, mapping tools, and ways the community and elected officials can provide input on where the community interests exist and how they can contribute to the building of the potential district. So with that, I would actually like to introduce Elizabeth Stitt with Redistricting Partners, who is going to help us through this tonight. Elizabeth, if you want to take it over from here, please.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I have a presentation. Tonight we're going to be going over what we call Districting 101. So it's going to go over the basics of what districting is. And let me share my screen. There we go. Okay. So I recognize that this is the first time that this district is going through, obviously, a districting. So please feel free to stop me and ask questions whenever you need to. But tonight we will be going over the law behind districting. So the California Voting Rights Act. We'll also be talking about the Federal Voting Rights Act. And what is districting? We'll get into the traditional districting and redistricting principles that are used in the line drawing process. And it's what we're going to be using throughout this entire process. And then, of course, we'll talk about the public hearing schedule and break down the purpose of each meeting. So let me get into it. The California Voting Rights Act, this was a law that was passed in the early 2000s, obviously in the California state legislature. Its purpose essentially was to prohibit at-large election systems if there is evidence of racial polarization occurring at the voting level. So at-large elections, that's what we have here. It's essentially when the entire district votes for all board members. What we're looking to now is election zones or by district elections. And I'll get into what that means in a little bit. And then just for clarification, racially polarized voting, that is when there is evidence that a protected class, so the three most common protected classes in California are Latinos, Asians, African Americans. So when a protected class votes cohesively together, and there's evidence that the majority population votes against their interests, so that would be racially polarized voting. So the California Voting Rights Act, it has similar principles to the Federal Voting Rights Act, but very different pieces of legislation. But it takes the principles and it expands on them in two very important ways. So under the Federal Voting Rights Act, there is what we call the majority minority district. So if there is a protected class with a citizen voting age population of over 50%, then a agency might be obligated to ensure that that population is drawn together. So they have the ability to elect their candidates of choice. It's different with the California Voting Rights Act. It's just having the ability to influence the election. So that's really a much lower threshold. Oftentimes that could be 20%, 30% citizen voting age population of a protected class. And then, of course, the CVRA, this is sort of the teeth of the legislation. Plaintiffs get fully reimbursed for any legal fees associated with a successful challenge. And so far, there hasn't been a challenge that has been unsuccessful. And of course, agencies can lessen or even eliminate any fees so long as they follow these safe harbor provisions. And so we will be following certain provisions along this process. So what is districting? Very simply put, it's the initial process of creating election district boundaries. After the next census cycle, you will be doing a redistricting. So very minute difference. It's just redistricting from there on out. But this is the initial phase. And what it does essentially is just tells you who is eligible to run for office and who is eligible to vote in that district. So obviously you have to live in that district in order to run for office, and you have to live in that district in order to vote for those candidates. So that's what districting does do, and then this is what districting doesn't necessarily do. So oftentimes, and especially with special districts, we get a lot of folks who are concerned that districting is going to divide their board, and it's going to have people focus only on their districts and not on the entire district at large. But we've found that it's often more of a cultural issue. So often when boards want to work together, they will continue to work on projects that impact the entire district. So going to districted elections doesn't mean that folks are only going to focus on their district. And then, of course, this will not impact services. The public will still continue to have the services they enjoy now. and be able to communicate with their representatives. So that will not change. Let's get into the Voting Rights Act. So I'm sure everyone has heard of this monumental piece of legislation. This was passed during the Civil Rights Act, or during the Civil Rights Movement, 1965. It's a very overarching bill, but there are two elements that are related specifically to redistricting that I want to talk about a little bit. Neither actually impact the district, but it is good to know. So first, we have Section 2. So Section 2 is the majority-minority district. So like I mentioned earlier, if there is a district that can be drawn that is over 50% of a citizen voting age population of a protected class, then the agency might be obligated to ensure that that protected class remains together so they have the ability to elect their candidates of choice. Now, there are other elements which I'll get to in a second about that. And then, of course, there's Section 5, but that has been deemed inactive since it was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2013. And even if that didn't happen, it would not have applied to the county of San Mateo anyway. And then, of course, the California Voting Rights Act is very different from the Federal Voting Rights Act, but similar in spirit. And I already went over that anyway. So the Section 2 issue is, so there are 3 prongs in this test to see if a agency would be required to protect ensure that a protected class has the ability to elect their candidate of choice. So this district isn't even close to 50% in any area of the district. So we are fortunate that we don't have to essentially jump over this extra hurdle in the districting process. But in case anyone's interested, this is the Jingles test preconditions. And whenever you hear a Section 2 non-compliance issue, this is what it's talking about. And then again, this just goes more into Section 2, but since there isn't a Section 2 non-compliance issue here, I'm just going to go past this. And then let's get into the districting criteria that we'll be using while we're drawing the lines. So in 2019, the state legislature passed the Fair Maps Act. This specifically impacts cities and counties. So it doesn't impact special districts, but we do use it as best practices. And honestly, it's very helpful to use this as a guide anyway, instead of arbitrarily coming up with, our own rules. So this is what we highly recommend to use during this process. This is a ranked list of criteria. And the first one is each zone, each election district needs to be relatively equal in size. And when we're talking about it, it's got to be under 10% total deviation. And I'll get more into what that means at the end of this presentation. For Congress, their total difference can only be 1 person. So we're lucky, we get a little bit more wiggle room to help protect communities of interest and draw them together. It's less of a handcuff that way. And then next on this list is each election zone needs to be contiguous. So that might not be a word you hear often. A way I like to think about it is it's just one whole piece. The zone is going to be one whole piece. You can't go from one part of the district to the other and say that's zone 1, right? It's got to be all touching. And then we want to maintain communities of interest. And we'll be talking a lot about communities of interest, especially at the next meeting, which will be designed more for the community to be involved in the process. But a good definition of communities of interest is it's a group of people who live close together, who have similar policy concerns and would benefit from being districted together. And I'll get more into what that means in a moment. Then we want to make sure the lines are easy to identify and they're understandable. Oftentimes that means following city lines, natural and man-made boundaries. So that includes things like rivers, or a man-made boundary is like a main thoroughfare or a highway. And then keep districts compact. Essentially what that means is we are trying to avoid those funny looking shapes that people associate with gerrymandering. So we're aiming to make wards or zones more circle and squares instead of long roundabout districts. So going back to communities of interest, we like to think of it as the building blocks of election districts. So the whole purpose is to ensure that people have a voice when they're voting, or that they have a voice with their elected representatives. And people are obviously stronger together when they vote together. So if we're talking about a neighborhood or a community group who lives close together, we want to make sure that we don't arbitrarily cut through their community and dilute their voice. And obviously, ethnic and language minority groups could be considered communities of interest. This really should be a subjective and open-ended definition to be as inclusive as possible. And of course, the Voting Rights Act did reference some communities of interest, so Latinos, Asians, African Americans, but it's very important to point out that race can't be the predominant factor when drawing lines, but it can be considered. And we probably will be talking about race throughout this process just because it's baked into the law, and we want to make sure we're doing our due diligence. So you'll see citizen voting age population of the three most common protected classes in California, and just know that's why. So communities of interest, a little bit more examples of what a community of interest is. Oftentimes, like LGBTQ neighborhood can be considered a community of interest. What we see a lot is a rural area, agricultural area versus more of a downtown urban area. These areas require different services. They have different needs and would benefit from being grouped together and hopefully not split. Another way of thinking about them, communities of interest, is they share a culture, similar characteristics. Again, neighborhoods are often cited as communities of interest, and they're geographic in nature. They're dense. We should be able to map them. In fact, we often encourage community members to map their communities of interest so we know exactly where it is during the map drawing process. And we would like to know what their relationship is with the agency. So how are they impacted by Montara? And then let's get into the at-large census and citizen voting age population of the district right now. So whenever we give you maps, we're always going to give you the 2020 census data and the citizen voting age population data. Those are two different data sets, but we need both to go forward with the districting. So the first one tells us, obviously, the census data. So when we look at the total population that we're working with, we have just over 5,500 people. When we split that by 5, we're going to have districts, by district zones that are about 1,100 people. When we talk about total deviation, it can't be more than a total of 10% deviation. So the differences between each of these districts will only be, it's going to be less than 100 people. So we're probably going to be somewhere between a difference of 30 to 60 people. So it's going to be pretty close to each other. And then the citizen voting age population data is what we're required to provide, and also helps us see the voting power for the protected classes in California. So a definition of citizen voting age population, it's exactly as it sounds. So if you are over the age of 18 and you are a US citizen, then you are included in this count. And I think, are there any questions so far on the population data?
So you said that, I just had a question about, I just want to be sure I heard you right, that the population groupings are done by people, not by voters. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. So we're looking at the total population as required. That is from the that's from SCOTUS telling us that we need to include everyone in our counts and not just voters. Yes.
Okay, and so that would also include children and.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great. Sid, you had a question?
I did want to ask you how you came up with these numbers. Are these by zip code? Because I noticed on your map you didn't include Moss Beach. You called the whole thing Montara.
Oh, sorry. That's the entire district. So that's the agency. It should include Moss Beach.
Well, these numbers are just broken down by Montara, not by zip code, in other words.
Yes, so that is the at-large district, and not just, it includes all the zip codes included in the agency.
And to tag on to what Sid is saying, the only reason we are not Montara, Moss Beach Water and Sanitary District was for the length of the name. So Montara and Moss Beach are like Siamese twins on each side of the hill, and I would appreciate it in the future if you would add Moss Beach to that. We are a single community called Montara Moss Beach.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My apologies for that.
Yep, Bill.
This isn't directly related to your question about how the population numbers are, but as I've heard about this redistricting process over the last 6 months from various people, I've heard that there was a lawsuit filed and that the state law was written so that it's practically pro forma, and that if a lawsuit is filed, it will be successful. This is the first I've heard that there has to be evidence of racially polarized voting. So at some point, not tonight, this is not the time for that, but at some point I would like to see what evidence was presented in court, because if I haven't heard of it now, it can't be that debilitating. But if it's not debilitating, we need to wonder why the lawsuit was successful. So that's the first question. And ultimately, I'll have questions probably about how the election is conducted, because I was a data guy for like ages. And as you're talking about the process of gathering the data points of votes, and which data points are aggregated at which point, and then which crosses the threshold and so forth. This is an algorithm, and I'm the only chief algorithm officer I've ever heard of. So I'm dying to know not just how we draw the lines and how we implement the very good principle of people getting to vote for what is closest to them, physically and socially, but it's important for me to know how the numbers add up. For instance, are the rules different for small voting areas and large ones?
So let me ask a question. I'm looking at the shaded area, and I'm not familiar with the boundaries that are used for this. Do you know which boundary you applied for this? I mean, yeah, we have service district boundaries, we have the election boundaries, but I see the boundary extending, for example, all the way down to include the Air Force Base down at the very bottom of this picture. And I'm just not familiar with any boundary that would go down that far.
Pillar Ridge is in Moss Beach.
I understand that.
Okay.
If you look at the graphic, it goes all the way to include the Air Force Base.
Right. And Princeton, it's not included.
That's right. I don't recognize this boundary, so I'm asking which one. Do you know which one you used?
So I believe this is the boundary that was provided to us by the district. If this is an incorrect boundary, we can work with staff and make sure that we correct that, because we absolutely need to use the correct boundaries, obviously.
I'm not saying it's incorrect. I'm just asking which one it is. I see Clemens has a response.
Yeah, so this is the official election map for the district.
Okay.
And yeah, so this was filed with San Mateo County and discussed with San Mateo County. And we had to go through this process about a year ago.
All right. It's I've looked at the precinct boundaries before, and I must just be blanking on that southern portion, but good to know. Thank you. Catherine?
That's all right. I need to see a larger scale map. I'm not sure I'm on this map.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I think you are.
I think you are.
I maybe, but at this scale,
It looks to go up to the green belt, which you're right at the edge.
kind of does, and I'm not sure that it doesn't. It appears not to include the folks who live on Torello Ranch.
I can send you all a
Agree with that.
URL link that we've created, so you can type in your address and look. And for every map that we send you from here on out will include a URL link, so you'll be able to zoom in and see at the street level. So hopefully that will help avoid any kind of confusion like this in the future.
Well, I think we're just trying to dial in. You've got some things for us to look at, so we're always going to ask questions. So nothing bad here. It's okay. We're a curious lot.
That's the nature of this board.
Yeah.
That's great. Any other questions before I get into the public hearing?
I can't see the public audience. Are there any hands raised there?
No one is outside.
And then for the online
That's it.
folks,
And I don't see anyone online this time.
Maybe sharing the
Oh,
screen, then we can see it.
sorry, there's Greg raising his hand and Bob Patasic raising a finger,
so let's go to Greg and then to Bob, please.
a hand. I'm sorry.
And I don't want to divert the agenda item, but I'm just curious, along the lines of Bill is, she mentioned this doesn't have to apply to special districts, yet for some reason we're doing this. So we lost a lawsuit. Why did we lose? What's the
So
instigating factor?
let's ask the direct question. Were you saying that this does not apply to special districts?
The California
No,
voting.
she said.
No,
He said that it.
not you, Greg. That I'm asking her.
The California Voting Rights Act absolutely applies to special districts. The Fair Maps Act applies to cities and counties, but we look to the Fair Maps Act as best practices.
Greg, did that answer your question?
No, the bigger question is, remind me, why did we lose the lawsuit, or what happened to cause this again? Sorry to beat it to death, but I'm lost on the original problem.
Yeah. Okay. So a complaint was brought, making claims. The way the law is written, as Bill's mentioned, it's basically the law is written so that really there's only one outcome that's any likely to happen, And the district, after much consideration, decided to agree to go ahead and do what every other district, with a couple of minor exceptions who are still in court, everybody else has just done what they've done. So we're in pretty good company. There's very little disagreement that at the size of our district that this kind of mechanism was considered when they wrote the law, but the law is what it is, and someone insisted that it be applied, and that's where we wound up. Bob, you had something?
I just wanted to ask, because she was going to go into the public hearing, the things I want to say, will I be able to ask questions and make a statement later?
Actually, did I fail to take us into the public hearing?
We haven't gone there yet.
No. Okay.
I'll wait till the public hearing.
I'm asking you comments.
Yeah, no, you have to open the public hearing at one point, I think. Right?
Okay. So will you let me know when the right time for that is?
I think after the presentation, probably.
Okay. Terrific.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So Bob, yeah, there'll be an opportunity.
I have one question.
Yes, Sid.
Considering that we're a fairly diverse and yet homogeneous district as it is, I mean, I don't know of any place but maybe Pillar Ridge where there's like a super concentration of like different or ethnic or even like a community of interest, that because they're in a mobile home park. So how are we going to figure out?
We'll be hearing a lot more from redistricting
Okay.
partners on this.
All right.
This is what they are the professionals at.
Okay.
And they will help us understand all the ins and outs of that.
Yes, and we'll be working with your staff as well to help with outreach in terms of recommendations, and we'll be providing tools and maps for the public to use as well. So let me go over the public hearing schedule, just so you guys know what's coming up and what to expect. So obviously tonight is the first of 5 hearings. We are required to have at least 5. So tonight is the introduction of the process. On May 18th is what we're considering the community outreach meeting. So we're going to expand on the community of interest aspect and really teach the community how they can get involved as well. So we are required to have at least 2 meetings before the maps are released. So tonight, and especially at the next meeting, we're hoping to get information on communities. For example, mobile home parks are often a cited community of interest, and that would be a great place to know as well. So we're looking for input from the board and the community on how they think the map should be drawn. When we get all of that information, on June 1st is when we're going to introduce the maps. So you will get at least 3 draft maps to look at. You'll assess them, let us know what you think, let us know what you don't like, what you do like, hopefully whittle it down to a map or 2, and then we'll make changes to those maps and then bring it back on July 20th, where you'll get a updated set of maps, possibly even new maps, and then you'll pick a favorite. Hopefully you'll feel confident in one by then, and then August 17th is when you will vote on a final map. So oftentimes what we do, especially for special districts, there's less public participation. So we do rely a lot on the board to give us direction on what they think the map should be, how they would best represent the communities. Of course, we know how to draw maps, so we'll be drawing the maps with your guidance, following the Fair Maps Act and federal law. So any questions on the next steps?
Anyone? Sid?
will you be putting Moss Beach on the map next time just for drawing lines purposes?
Absolutely. Yes.
Thanks.
Glad to.
Greg has his hand up.
Okay, Greg, thank you.
And I apologize. I don't know when I'm allowed to ask this question because I don't know what's supposed to be covered in the public hearing. But some of you are well aware that it was the end of, it was early April before we were able to fill the vacancies in the Mid-Coast Community Council, of which I'm chair. So it took us all the way into this time of the year to find people who were willing to serve. So my question is, with these district boundaries drawn around such small groups of people, let's just imagine that you don't get any candidates raising their hand from a district or two, and your board has to go, as we did, through an appointment process. Are you allowed to appoint people from non-residents of one of the districts that didn't have a representative? Well, when do we get to worry about that? I know that's not specific to the redistricting process, but from my point of view, you're going to run into this problem right away because we've already run into it. Thanks.
So they have to live in the district and they have to live within their election district, regardless of whether they're appointed or not. And one of the reasons why we're doing this so early is to help with the recruitment process. So these lines won't go into effect until 2024. Hopefully that will give the community enough time to recruit and look for serious candidates.
Clemens, I don't see on the agenda in the item anything about opening and closing the public hearing. So I'm thinking maybe I should just open the public hearing at this point.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, I declare the public hearing open, and we're going to go for questions and comments. And I saw Bill's hand. I see Catherine's hand. I'm looking to the audience. If you want to raise your hand at some point, I'll try to keep an eye out for you. So, Bill?
So this isn't a question specifically about maps, nor specifically about population, but about the thing I said I was going to talk about, which conveniently Greg just raised. So the overall subject is, what happens in small districts when they're divided even further into tiny parts? And so the first question for you is, what is the range of redistricting populations that you've done in your experience? Like, how many projects have you worked on, and what was the biggest and what was the smallest, and sort of what was the scatter?
I mean, our agency has worked with humongous agencies, including like the city of LA, the city of New York. But then we've also worked with very small agencies. For example, there was a school district in Central California where we had to ensure that they had literally the same population, because if they had one off, they would have been over 10% deviation. So we have worked with very, very small ones as well. The county of San Mateo is very unique, and we've worked with many clients in San Mateo. What I think we're going to encounter, because the deviation is so small in this case, we're going to encounter some Census Bureau block issues. So I'll be going over what that means at the next meeting. You'll see census blocks. And because the way that San Mateo is shaped, it's very hilly, lots of water. There are some very oddly shaped census blocks. So I think that's probably going to be the biggest issue that this district faces in terms of drawing. But in terms of recruitment or anything like that, I'll probably turn it over to staff who would know better than me.
Thanks for telling us about the census block part. I hadn't realized that there's going to be some uncertainties in the references from which you try to figure out how many people are there in the first place. So as a data guy, that's the kind of thing I get. When you talk about 10% deviations, I know that means you need at least 100 people in a district to make that happen. Law of large numbers and so forth. But when I asked about the largest and smallest, I was hoping you would tell me the numbers. I assume LA is like 1 million, but the school district, what was the population there?
Oh, I honestly can't remember. That was like a year and a half ago. So that population would have been in the hundreds. It would have been very, very small.
So you've worked with groups with places even smaller than our district.
Yes.
And you have successfully found elections in which people actually run separately from all the districts and get elected and things work.
Yes.
All right, that's what we're hoping for. Good.
Sid.
Well, quickly, to Greg's question, let's just say you have these small districts for Montara now, and somebody passes away or doesn't run again, and you have to fill that seat from somebody within that district. Do we just have to get out and pound the bushes till we find someone? Is that pretty much what happens?
I imagine so, especially if it's you're filling a seat after an election, right? So that would be an appointment. I imagine that you have an already established appointment process.
Okay, I see Michelle's hand, and I also see Christine. Did you want to reply to that?
Thank you, President Boyd. Just quickly, if the district fails to appoint a director from a particular district, the statute provides that the county board of supervisors is sort of the default entity that would then appoint somebody from the particular district.
Well, allow me to mention though that
That's true now.
you can only appoint someone who's willing. And the question that Bill was asking about was about what happens when you can't find a willing person to stand for the seat. So you can't appoint a non-existent person. So it's the same conundrum. And I think to Bill's question and to Sid's question, of course, if no one steps forward, then it's up to us to go find someone. Because whether it's this board appointing or the county supervisors appointing, there have to be people willing to stand. Sid? Oh wait.
And that did happen with the MCC.
Yeah.
One person got appointed to GCSD, and they left that board, but so there was a vacancy, but also nobody ran for the other seat.
Right.
So they did have to go out and pound the bushes, but then there was a kind of like a slow process for that, and that's why it's taken this long.
We're going to go to Michelle. She's had her hand up for a while.
Sorry, Michelle.
Hi, I was just wondering, what was the school district to which you were referring? The name of it?
Let me look into it because, again, this was like a year.
I know, a year and a half. But I guess get back to Clemens on it. I just would like to see what the school district looked like.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Recognize Bob.
First of all, I need to start out with saying I realize this is a done deal and it's going forward. I've supported the federal voting rights to make sure that those with small voices get an opportunity. But if you have a hammer, not everything is a nail. And to me, what's being done to our district, having a split is, I'll keep my opinion or what I want. It's not the best thing for us. And for that, I'd like to give you some data. There are 2,928 registered voters. Those are the ones who will select. There may be 5,500 residents, but the voters are 52% of the population. In the last election in November 8th, 1,707 voted at a 58% turnout. Now, splitting using the latest voting right results, that makes it about 340 people per district, of which 3 seats could be accomplished and won by 1,024 votes. The minimum number, that was if everybody voted, for 50% plus one, it would only take 171 votes in a district to win that. And therefore, 3 of those districts, or 17.49%, would be able to dictate what this district does. That to me goes against the federal voting rights, where yes, racially discriminated folks need an ability to have a voice. This is going to allow people who can't get elected because they either don't have the right message or what they want to do is not something the population supports. This is a way to control the boards. And you guys can look at, there's a rule of 13% from 30, 40 years ago. That is how the South school boards were controlled. 13% of the population was able to control the board. And that goes against what the districting is supposed to do, is give small voices an opportunity. But you also have to recognize that what we're doing with districts could eventually have a detrimental effect on the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Actually, as I'm thinking about it, we're in a public hearing. This is our opportunity to hear from the public, and then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll go to board discussion. I have comments. Bob, very thought-provoking. Thank you for that. Do we have any other public comments? Not seeing any. Let's have a vote about closing the public hearing. That's how we do this. So I could have a motion and a second to close.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. Peter and Sid have moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The motion carries 5-0. The public hearing is closed. Thank you, everyone. Let me just start, Bob, because I was just eager to chime in with my amen to what you're saying. Thank you very much for those comments. This law as written is, I believe, inimical to, let me just use a better word. This law undermines the ability of small communities to take the people who are willing to serve and put them to work in the public interest, and creates artificial barriers to public participation, which I believe runs counter to good public process. Like Bob, I strongly support any underrepresented group having support, and I am mindful of the small number control aspect, which is something we have to be on guard for. Let me just highlight that we have now had a number of meetings in which we've been attempting to put information out to help educate members of the public about how this works. We've been making appeals for people to consider entering public service. It's a good, right, and honorable thing to do, and we want to promote that. And some people might look at a number of elected people saying, hey, come on, come fight to get a seat at the table. Might think this is a really weird thing for politicians to do, but we're interested in the health of this district on the behalf of the community, and that takes people who are going to come and work in the public interest. So of course we want to appeal to people to stand for the opportunity to serve. All right.
Well said.
Let's go to Bill first. You look eager.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad for what Bob was saying, because it's the same intellectual texture as my point, even though weirdly it's at the opposite end. Your point is that certain aspects of the way the rules are regarding minority voting and stuff like that allows very, very small groups to run the whole show, whereas the purpose of the law is to prevent the very large from running the whole show and to essentially let smaller groups have their own voice. That's the way it's supposed to be. I'm concerned about the opposite end. So I'm also concerned about numerical instabilities in the algorithm for actually doing the voting and creating representation. And as a mathematically minded guy, I freak out when I see politicians saying that 2 + 2 = 17. So here is what I'm worried about. Let's start with the idea that this board can do an amazing job drumming up enthusiasm for public service. You know, during COVID, they had it's we now, but it was you then, 4 or so different webinars on introducing people to public service, how to run for things. And it wasn't just about for the water board, because that's obviously what it was. And as far as I can tell, the net result of that incredible effort was 1 new candidate, and that was me. And I'm very glad I did it, and I very much appreciate that. But if, as a numbers guy, I'll just use that as a baseline, that a full frontal attack of a year and a half will yield 1 new candidate out of 3,000, that's the only number we got, it's a good one to start with, then the odds that we can get 5 different districts of 500 each, or whatever it is, to each field a candidate, if we couldn't do 1 out of 2,500, is numerically impossible. So I think there's a high probability, just starting with the numbers, that we will wind up with a whole bunch of unfilled districts. Then what happens? Well, we appoint someone. No. The largest at-large of all, the entire San Mateo County, now appoints. Not even us appointing. That's what Christine said. It's the supervisors and not the board. It's not like when we filled SIT. I just heard that it's the county. But
No,
Only if we fail to.
only if we fail to appoint.
okay, good.
And
So the
again, the only person you can appoint is the person that exists and wants to serve.
In that district.
So whoever's the appointing body would be faced with the same conundrum
Yes,
of what do I do when no one stands?
good. That's a saving grace.
Then you
Well,
have
it's-
elections.
Yeah.
Well, good. It's not as bad as I thought it would be.
So let's go to Catherine.
Thank you. I have a question for Christine. I hear Bob and Bill and Sid, and I agree with everyone talking about this. And one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is there are some larger monetary interests who have a particular point of view that would eliminate the existence of this district.
If they could.
Keep going.
She has the floor.
I'm sorry.
Really, we have to do that.
And I want to know if MWSD can put in our own campaign finance regulations. Something to think about and look into. I'm not asking for an instant answer, but finance is one of the biggest ways to get people involved. And they have a long-lasting stake when they have donated to a campaign. I've followed the districting of the Harbor District, and one of the things they did, which I liked conceptually and support even for MWSD, is to have a district that united in the terms of the Harbor District. The districts go from the ocean to the bay. They are long, skinny districts, population centers separated by the reservoir and the mountain, but nonetheless, each district has a vested interest in what the Harbor District does, which is on both the bay and the ocean. I would like to see the MWSD districts encompass both Montara and Moss Beach, so that it has a uniting effect. I think we don't have to look at this as divisive. We can look at a way of more closely uniting our districts. And I don't want to see necessarily a checkerboard across the population, but maybe it should somewhat mirror the Harbor District and go up and down the coast. Thank you.
we have any other board members with anything to comment? All right. Well, with that, let's keep the meeting moving along. Thank you so much for the presentation. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
All right. So let's go to the first new business item: review and possible action concerning Montara Water and Sanitary District 65th year anniversary.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So we brought this up at the last meeting, essentially forming a committee that's helping with the planning. And we thought it would be a good idea to have this item up one more time, just to get some basic questions answered. I think what we want to focus on today is really to nail down the date. And just want to hand over the word to the committee and see if they can help figure out, establish the time and date when we want to have our 65-year anniversary celebration. And it's actually our 20-year anniversary of the ownership of the water system.
Thank you. We met twice. Bill and I are the ad hoc committee, and Clemens was giving us some input. He gave us the budget from the last time that you had a meeting, a celebration like this for an anniversary event, which was for your 60th for the water sewer district. But this will be our 20th for the water district and 65th for the sewer. As far as tonight goes, I'm hoping we can at least arrive at a decision, if possible, for a specific date and a location, because I was tasked to try to get permits if we can do that. So what I went and did was check the calendar, and the Labor Day weekend starts on September 1st and ends on the 4th. However, it was brought to my attention that some people take more than that time off, and so the 9th and the 10th is still another weekend that they might consider to be Labor Day, even though it's not. And then Scott tonight mentioned September 15th through the 17th is Rosh Hashanah, and we probably shouldn't pick that weekend because it's a Jewish holiday, and people shut down for that. Some people shut down for that. And I did see on Nextdoor within the past 2 weeks since we last met that they've picked the date for the Montara Street Fair of September 17th, which is a Sunday. And also, I asked the directors to let me know if they'll be out of town on any dates they won't be available for, because I figure every director will want to be at the celebration. And Catherine Slater Carter will be gone from the 13th to the 17th. So we kind of figured that date might be scratched off the list. But also the Montara Street Fair is one of those days. Then that leaves the September 23rd and 24th of the Pacifica Fog Fest. So if you think of the whole month of 30 days in September, there's a total of 9 that we could choose from, but there's really only about 4. And that would include if we use the October 1st as one of them. So Saturday, September 9th, Sunday, September 10th, or Saturday, September 30th are the 3 dates that aren't conflicting with other things in September. And as a group, we kind of thought Saturday would be a better day than Sunday, but we're going to be democratic about it and let you guys decide or weigh in. So if you still think a Sunday would be good, then we could also put the October 1st date in for 4 possible dates. And then, it's going to take some work from our crew to help set it up and that sort of thing. And the preference of the ad hoc committee, and especially Clemens, was to have it here in the parking lot to save a deposit. I did reach out to some of the suggested venues Catherine reached out to the Yacht Club, and I reached out to the Mavericks. Mavericks wanted $1,000 deposit, and you could only have X amount of people. I think 141 was their maximum capacity. And they also required you to use their catering service. that sort of thing. So if we have it here in our own parking lot, we could go to a festive affair, have them deliver a barbecue grill, and we could do something that way, have the crew flipping burgers or not, hot dogs for kids. But that's all up in the air at the moment, depending on what you guys want. I also contacted Casey and Miles about getting their pizza oven, which was portable, but the storm crushed it, so that's not available. I was very sad to hear that, because I thought that would be fun if we have them roll up into the parking lot and make a wood-fired pizzas for people, but that's not an option anymore. So we could probably still have it catered and, have different groups sponsor the burgers or not, but that's still up in the air too, because Clemens says we really can't solicit donations like we did in the past. I think we had $15,000 worth of donations, or 5,000 or something.
Spent 15,000.
Oh, that's right. The total, the
The
net.
donations for the food were from me.
Oh, they were?
Yeah, I brought all the hamburgers and,
Okay.
and the salads, and then we had a potluck.
Yeah.
And potlucks are very successful
Yeah.
in Montara, and I suggest because we are a community. We are not separate from the community. So I believe sharing food among friends is a more of a community active
Right.
anything.
And if we provided a barbecue grill, people could bring their own meat if they wanted, if there's people who want garden burgers or whatever. But
I'm going to
that's
suggest
down
that we focus on picking a date
Right,
tonight.
exactly, the date and the
And-
venue.
Yeah, and the venue.
September the 9th, Saturday, sounds good to me.
Me too. But Clemens might have wanted to go on vacation then, but it doesn't matter.
No, that's fine.
He said he would postpone.
Catherine, do you have a?
I have a comment. Another reason we need to pick the date tonight is if we have it here, and I love the idea, because we could give little tours and stuff. We need to hire like an off-duty policeman who can show up in uniform to help people get across the street,
Oh, yeah.
both in Moss Beach and close to here. Because a lot of our community does walk around. We're even some of us old ones are pretty mobile, and bicycles and skateboards and those kinds of things. But if it's going to be on a weekend, we need to have somebody in an official uniform to help people get across the street.
Or even turn in. I almost got creamed the other day just making a left turn from my house into the driveway.
All right, so we've got an ask for some
September
uniform
9th.
traffic control. Good thought.
Exactly.
About the date.
I'm open.
Okay, I'm definitely leaning hard on a Saturday.
The 9th?
I could do the 9th, or
Or the 30th.
I could do it pretty much any of the open Saturdays, but it looks like we're kind of aligning on the 9th is what I'm hearing. So
Yeah.
Consensus, Saturday the 9th?
I think so.
So I'm going to take it on my calendar and remove the word proposed, and I'm going to change it to the word planned. If we have to change plans, let's figure that out as soon as possible. But for now, that's our plan.
And is this venue good too? Because that
Oh,
way.
let me
if-
say something about the venue. I would not call it the parking lot. It is a part of the coastal trail, and it is the coastal trail in front of the district office.
Okay.
And I want to talk it up. Let's not diminish it by calling it the parking lot.
Sorry.
Oh, no, we use it for that, and that's true. It's just, but
Nice.
Okay.
it's a nice for people who don't visualize it when they hear that. It's a long stretch. It's got a good size. It'd be bigger than the Montara Street Fair had for its layout on several years. So hey, what a great place. The view's terrific. Tours are going to be, I think, it's a nice opportunity for us to find a way to help the community see some of what is theirs and serves them. Bill?
Just to that point, the one way I could characterize the two meetings that Sid Clements and I had about this was that almost all of our thought space was hovering around using this as a venue. We never really imagined doing it anywhere else, but that's all I really think I need to say.
Well, we researched those other places because they were tossed out at the
Yeah.
last meeting, and
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah.
I found out I mean, one of the things that I objected to is those aren't in our district.
Oh,
This is.
well, I was thinking, various streets in the community as well, but
Well, true, but the one down, I didn't get a hold of San Mateo County to find out getting a permit to close off Carlos Street, but
block
Anyway.
parties aren't
as
just so the public knows, block parties aren't that hard to establish permits for.
Okay.
If you want to do it, it's a great thing for the community, and if more people want to have more block parties, bring it on. It'd be a good thing. Okay, so we picked a date. Do we have any other business to do on this item tonight?
Well, we talked a little bit today about swag, but that's down the road.
Okay.
He brought it. That's why he brought the Montara mugs out.
All right. Well, let's then thank you for the work that you've done thus far. It's free to see.
Michelle has her hand up.
Oh, yeah, I can't see because the screen's being shared. So,
Right now.
Michelle.
Thanks. Yeah, Blake Merckx is amazing. He's the guy that organizes the Montara Fair. He might be, for a little bit of money, able to organize the whole thing for you, Sid, so that you don't have to do all of the work yourself.
I'm not. I've got an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, well, I mean, but he's done the permitting process, and I'm sure he would love to contribute and things like that. That's just an idea.
Well, yeah, thanks for the suggestion, Michelle.
I couldn't hear who she said.
Yeah, it's Blake Merckx. He's well known in the community as the chief rabble rouser behind the Montara Street Fair.
And his phone number is on Nextdoor with
Okay.
his announcements about the
Oh, okay.
September 17th event.
Okay, so let's now go to the next item: review and possible action concerning update of standard specifications for the water system.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So essentially, we had to update the standard specifications because we've seen a series of changes in law, particularly when it comes to additional dwelling units. We also actually revised our code some time ago, and this reflects these changes, essentially very specifically addressing the second meter requirements for additional dwelling units that we recently implemented. So that said, we're hoping that the board is adopting the proposed 2023 version of the Montara Water System Standard Specifications and adopts the resolution next in order. Thank you.
All right, Catherine.
I had the pleasure of attending a meeting at SAM today in which 5 people from FEMA for the claim against the breakage at the SAM pipeline that's in Montara and the damage to the plant were addressed. And it was a fascinating meeting, but they were looking for lots of documentation about various things, what our standards were, what our MOU was. So they were looking for, make sure we were only repairing what was broken and damaged and not trying to slip in other improvements. That said, one of the things that was discussed was replacing the section of pipe that broke with HDPE, and they said, did you repair it with the same material that was used to build it in the same size? And the answer, of course, was no. We used HDPE, which is stronger and better for our situation. They said, do you have proof that that is either a code or a standard, that you're not trying to slip something in? They didn't use slip something in, I did. That said, I asked them, so that means that for Montara Water and Sanitary, we may need to make sure that we specify the materials and have maybe even have a section of our code that says materials, both for sewer and for water, and that we have all of these specific items and things detailed. One of the two of the pieces of equipment that they haven't investigated yet to be whether they were damaged or not, but we're pretty sure they were. One is a welder and one's a arc welder. And so I think from Montara, what I took away from that meeting was we need to have a very specific inventory of all of our equipment, parts, and materials that we use, so that if we ever need to go to FEMA for something, we can just pull it out and say, oh yeah, here's our code. It says HDPE for everything over, 4 inches or whatever the code is. Anyway, there was a engineer from SRT who was very up to date on that, and I think that it's something that Clemens, you might want to talk to Keishan about. I will also give parenthetically that the FEMA staff that was there were very complimentary about the level of organization at SAM, how so there was so much pre-done documentation. They said we seldom see this done as well. And a lot of credit goes to our accounting crew, and also to the fact that in spite of the problems that came about, Sam had converted to Tyler, so they were able to download the financial data in all different kinds of arrangements to give to FEMA, so that they could be comfortable knowing what stage of these projects we were at and how much it had cost. And I am, as an aside, again, I am hopeful that we will receive most of our costs of this pipeline breakage up here and the damage to the plant covered.
Yay.
I read through, or I glanced at the 117 pages of specifications for the specifically water pipes. And yes, it is very clear in that specification what exactly should be used and when, and for how long the pipes, or how long the pipe should be, and what the minimum diameter should be. So with a bit of fine tuning from Clement's side, I'm sure we can use this ADU change in the specifications to also update the other specifications and make sure we are on the right track.
Yes, that's correct. And as Peter says, both this, so we're looking exclusively on our water standard specifications, but also the sewer standard specifications are, let me say it this way, they are clear on what material to use in which scenario, if that is needed, or give us the flexibility to use various materials in other scenarios. So,
So I make the motion that we accept this update of the specifications, subject to some fine tuning.
I'll second that. Oh, there's 2 seconds, so
Nice.
Bill can have it.
Oh, well, I got it actually. Split the baby here. No, I'm gonna give it to you.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So it's half a second. That's a first.
All right. Do we have any further comment? If not, leave. This is not by resolution. This is final motion, right?
no, there is actually a resolution. I
Okay.
apologize.
I
The
have-
recommendation didn't
apologize.
capture that, but
I was down on page 177, so I didn't have the item directly in front of me. Okay, give me a second here. Here we go. So the recommendation is that we adopt the proposed 2023 version of the water system standard specifications by resolution. Motion's been made and seconded by Peter and Catherine. Could we have a roll call vote, please? Director Decker,
Yes.
Director Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Sofsky,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
and Director Boyd votes aye. The resolution passes 5-0. Thank you. All right. Reports. Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. Catherine, you've already told us a lot. How much more can there be?
There's a meeting Monday night. Please watch. We will be discussing the budget. and there is a big number in the infrastructure budget of $3.5 million to finish the repairs to the pipeline between Montara and and I think it's Portola in El Granada. In any event, it's about 13,000 feet. We are under a requirement to finish it sometime either this year or next year with a settlement decree by ERF. And it doesn't look like we're going to fit it in the timeline that we needed to due to COVID and other circumstances. And so, but it is a multi-million dollar project that 3.5 million is only a small portion. Part of the contract has been approved. It was let out to 10 agencies for design work, and only one bid on it. And so the design work is in process, and a biologist has been hired for $38,000. Things are not inexpensive anymore. But so we're moving forward on that. It is my anticipation that the budget will be approved without much problem. And that's really the biggest issue there. So please tune in. It's important for the public to know what kind of costs this district is facing when we're doing our rate making.
I just want to add that we have also been looking at audit proposals. We've sent out 10 audit proposals at SAM, and we've received 3 offers.
3, that's good. All right, Midcoast Community Council, Greg. Oh, you seem animated again. You were quite stoic there for a while.
I'm animated.
Well, compared to your still photo, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we now have 7 members on the MCC. Kimberly Williams and Ann Rothman have been officially sworn in. I'm very pleased to have them join us. We wrote another letter in support of changes to the Brown Act to allow remote participation. I'm pleased to see Senator Becker has introduced the language I requested about immunocompromised family members into a Senate bill. I haven't seen that Montara or Sam have written any letters supporting any of these bills. I might modestly ask that you look at what we've done and copy them and submit your own. My conversations with the aides for Becker and Berman are that all these letters are helping, and I think it's a good thing to have the flexibility. Especially remember what happened when Ann Rothman didn't show up for the election because she thought she'd just been exposed to COVID. Wasn't that a good idea to not come in public? All right. We have updated that telecommunications report, which I've spoken about before. We've expanded the work group. Harvey Rarbeck and Matthew Chittister, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, invited me to present the next step, which is, so what do we do about the telecommunications problems? And I presented Tuesday night the concept of a community fiber network. There have been hundreds of them across the country. I offer such a presentation to MWSD if you're interested. There's also something called the Middle Mile, a funding program the state has come out with, and I'm now going to be participating in those meetings. There is hope we might get a broadband cable laid down Highway 1 sometime in 2025, 2026 time period. And if that did occur and were state funded, we could avoid the oligopoly, but we would have to still get into the networks ourselves. At any rate, the reason I bring this up again is it occurred to me that the MCC has not officially sent the report to your district or the others, GCSD, SAM, etc. And I know SAM people have expressed to me some concerns they have with the telecommunications with their remote monitoring stations and so forth. So I'm going to ask the MCC to transmit the report to you and invite MWSD to augment the report, correct the report, and or endorse the report in terms of the statement of needs and problems. The more endorsements I get that we have a problem, the higher our probability is of getting some kind of state funding for middle mile funding for the broadband and other funding. I don't know if the district has ever done anything like this, but that's what I'm going to ask you to do, is to join forces in supporting that. I'm not asking you to endorse the recommendations in the study, and I'll make that quite clear, because recommendations and solutions are a whole other thing. But if the problem statement is accurate, then I'd appreciate it if you would support the definition of it. We're also going to be looking into stormwater. I got some pushback from a county official saying we didn't really have a stormwater problem out here. And I've been trying to find what the stormwater management process is out here. And I confess I'm still mystified. We're going to have Reed Bogert from CCAG, the City and County Association of Governments, who has been doing proactive work on stormwater mitigation, try and talk about what they've been doing in other cities. But then I'd like to contrast that with what's being done in our area. If you know anything about how stormwater management is done, please let me know. I feel like I've tripped over a Sid Young kind of issue where there's supposed to be a fund collected for stormwater funding. Nobody knows where the money is, how it's been spent, or whether the amounts being raised are in proportion to the probable cost of building an effective stormwater management system. And then lastly, we did have an update from Cabrillo. Maybe you're all aware of it, but it was fascinating to hear Sean McFetteridge talk. Both the schools in El Granada and Montara are, for the first time, going to be getting some of the bond proceeds. There's going to be substantial redesigns, rebuilding, and upgrades to both schools. It looks great. He's really done his homework, and that presentation is on our website if you care to look at it. Thank you. That's it. Any questions?
Catherine, you had a comment.
Yeah, I was talking to some utility workers the other day, and about 5-6 years ago, there was a big stormwater problem on the lower part of Cedar Street, and it was flooding people's yards. And so the county put in a storm drain, fixed it all up, ran it down, and dumped it into Montara Creek, where it is now just flooding the folks who live on the downhill side of Cypress with their backyards along the creek. This is, and of course, this is no problem. I think if we, and I do know in talking to the Sam and Montara crews that there is a lot of I&I from Montara and Granada, particularly, for instance, Quarry Park. And I have some photos of the Alameda where the water is just pouring down. And it runs directly onto the ocean with all the debris is there. So yes, there is a problem. Do you want letters from individuals stating that there is a problem with our internet and telecommunications as well?
I will take anything I can get, but I need to have it in writing. I can't be seen to be making this up just on my own observations and opinions, although I have hundreds of photographs and bunches of videos. So the idea that we get individuals or your agency stating whether we have telecommunications issues or whether we have stormwater problems, I need to be able to attach that as a body of evidence to the reports I'm creating. Christine will understand why.
I want to say thank you, Greg, to you and the MCC for all the work you're putting in on this. You're getting their attention, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure you will be getting letters on both stormwater and telecommunications, both from this district and from the individuals who are involved.
Yeah, I think we're stronger together, so I appreciate that. Bob, you too.
On stormwater, Greg, today I attended virtually the CCAG stormwater meeting, and the county is supposed to, represent, Ann Stillman is supposed to be on that board, and even they didn't show up. They had like 9 people, including me, a member of the public. So they did talk about some of the funding that's available, and but we as a Midcoast community cannot reach out for our own grants. That would be something the county needs to do. But I really think the Quarry Park flooding issue is the worst, because it does go down. It was going straight down Santa Maria from the park out to 4 blocks down to the first storm drain, which was on the Alameda, but then that just runs out to the ocean. And then they came and had the Department of Public Works channel it over on Columbus down through Avenue Cabrillo, I believe, and off to Santiago. Well, I followed it when it was really raining, and I saw all this water going down the other direction now suddenly. And, they had to engineer sandbags and sawhorses and everything, but it still was going down Santa Maria. But then I looked, it's going in a storm drain, but it was just going across the road and flowing out into the Murata Surf East. And lo and behold, down on Highway 1, where they're building the new $4 million multimodal trail, it was flooding that. So I don't think
I could use testimony. I could use testimony on that multimodal trail. We have a work group on stormwater. Burnett Silveria, who lives in that area, has well documented the problems on Santa Maria. I probably have the best documentation and photos and video evidence of that. What I don't have is the rest of what you said about what happened down past Alhambra and how it affected the multimodal trail. So any testimony to that regard would be great.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. Catherine, do you have anything for CSDA or LAFCO?
LAFCO, as folks who are here may have heard, is
Oh.
replacing.
Is Bob waving good night?
Yeah, I'm
Hi,
an old
Bob.
man. Bye.
All right.
Have a good
Good night,
day.
Bob.
Good night, Bob.
Thanks for being here.
Bob, come back again, please. It's nice to hear your voice and your comments.
You just want me to piss somebody off. That's what you want.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's part of that's an important point.
The good old days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take
right.
care. Good night.
Bye, Bob.
Good night.
Catherine, you're saying LAFCO?
LAFCO is replacing Rick Lohman on LAFCO, or it was the alternate anyway. And so I know now of two applicants. One is Chris Michelson, and the other is Virginia Chang Corrali. Virginia Chang Corrali I have known for years, and she is the strongest advocate for special districts that I know. And I think that if we don't have, and she's very outspoken, and we need somebody on LAFCO to be outspoken in favor of special districts. She understands the issues like spheres of influence. The municipal service reviews are coming up, and we need somebody who will stand up against special districts losing their powers and their influence. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question about that, Catherine?
Sure.
I remember Rick being a very strong advocate in the case of the Palo Alto sanitary district that they were fighting with a developer. And I just wonder if you've talked to Virginia and happen to know if she's, in favor of getting rid of that district just because they didn't want to kowtow to a developer.
I haven't talked to Virginia specifically about that. Knowing Virginia, I would say she is such an outspoken person in favor of keeping special districts. One of her strongest points is government's responsibility to the ratepayers and the taxpayers. And when a special district can only spend its money on its mission, and cities can take the sewer funds or the water funds, put them into the general fund, and let the stormwater drains or the sewers or whatever fall into disrepair, and then have to raise the rates because they've been diverting the money. So I believe Virginia would be very much in favor of protecting this district.
Okay, thank you. Good question.
Thanks.
Christine, any attorney's report?
No attorney's report.
Do we need to say anything about conflict of interest?
We do not.
Okay, terrific. Let's see. Any director's reports? General manager's report?
No report.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to take a brief recess and bid you all good night. We'll allow PCT to pack up, and then we'll reconvene, and where we will have a few items in closed session. If we take any action on those items, we'll report those out after the meeting. So we've got conference with legal counsel on existing litigation where the city of Half Moon Bay is suing its neighbors, long-running matter. Conference with legal counsel, 3 potential cases, initiation of litigation, public employee performance evaluation, and conference with labor negotiators with respect to our general manager. Conference with real property negotiators on the property 771 Rivera Road in Montara. With that, we are in recess. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thanks for attending, everyone in the audience.